Liereyy, the young Austrian Age of Empires 2 player, has won KOTD3, arguably this year's biggest professional Age of Empires 2 tournament, $50,000 prize pool. And I finally learned how to spell his name, so that's pretty good. I know you guys are really edgy, the fact that I mixed up the I and the E. So, yeah, so Liereyy, what a beast. What a freaking beast. His run is totally incredible. Especially considering the bracket that he had, but we'll go through that. So this video is breaking down his particular run in KOTD3. I'm going to focus from his point of view how the tournament progresses, and I'm going to save all my other comments and like just feedback in general regarding KOTD as a tournament. Maybe talk about the Viper a little bit, talk about Hera. I'm going to say that for another video. This is really just a Liereyy focused video because he's the winner of the tournament, and that's what I want to break down. So first thing, the fact that he won the tournament itself, for me, this puts Liereyy as the clear number one player for 2020. He's won now KOTD3 and Red Bull 2, so he's dominated the second half of 2020. Right, I don't think anybody comes close in terms of results. If you rewind the calendar a little bit, you could maybe say, okay, Yo with Red Bull 1, he's a candidate for best player of the year, and he has strong results all along the year. Right, but for me, it's the fact that Liereyy won KOTD3, which is a Arabia-only tournament, and that he won Red Bull Wolo, two different settings, two different tournaments, longer span of time. For me, it makes him the more dominant player in my books compared to Mr. Yo. And, you know, Viper also would get a mention because early 2020, end of 2019, like around the launch of DE, he was very dominant as well. He won Hidden Cup, the Viper. So clearly he's a dominant player. He won Hidden Cup over Hera. So Viper would be another name, the candidate for best player of the year. But I think that he's really dropped off in the last like 6 months, especially now that we have like this sort of triangle of who can beat who between Yo, Hera, and Liereyy. It's really tight between those three. Much more. I think it's a lot more competitive between those three, between Viper and someone else. I mentioned that in another video that I think that the storylines going forward is not going to be like who can take out the Viper. It's going to be who between Yo, Liereyy, and Hera is going to really start to dominate the game if they can do that. So Liereyy beat Yo in this tournament as well. Very important detail for me why I would consider him the more dominant player this year is because he actually beat Yo, took him out in this tournament. And Hera took out Yo in Red Bull Wolo 2, and Liereyy can take out Hera. So everyone can beat everyone basically, but it looks like Liereyy more often than not will get the advantage. And more importantly, here's the detail: is that he's super clutch to close out big series against his big opponents that would stop him from winning the tournament, for example. Right? I think that he has a much bigger clutch factor than Hera, for example, and he has a much bigger clutch factor than Yo. So it looks like a really precarious balance in terms of competitiveness between those three. So yeah, so I have Liereyy edging out both of them though for this year, and I could safely say that I think he's the player of the year for 2020. I'd give him 2020 as his year. What's interesting is that I think second place overall for this year is even a harder debate because it's like, well, who do you give? If Liereyy was the best player of the year, who do you give second place to in terms of who had the best year? I think Hera is a really solid case because he's Mr. Number 2. Like he's had so many big second places, and also he basically only loses to the winner of the tournament most of the time. So, for example, in this case, loses to Liereyy. Well, Liereyy, goes on to win the whole thing, right? And like I mentioned in my quarterfinals video, maybe if he doesn't get that bracket, they probably meet in the finals again, right? That bracket of the upper bracket of KOTD was completely whack, and like it's basically a bunch of potential finals for a big tournament, one after the other. But we'll go through that. So yeah, so Hera basically only loses to Liereyy. So anyways, I think second place is maybe a more interesting discussion. For me, the discussion on first place is closest Liereyy. The scariest part of that is that Liereyy is super young, and he still, in my opinion, has not hit his prime, because we know that for esports pros, most of them hit their prime around 23, 24. He's around, I think, 18 or 19, or maybe 20, but he's around that age. So he has like potentially even 3 or 4 more years to develop. And now he has a serious org backing him. He has Tempo. I made a video about Hera joining Tempo. Basically, it's all the same talking points, but for Liereyy, it's a young team that likes to develop players, likes to let them reach their potential and then resell them to even bigger orgs. It's an organization that attracts other investments into the scene. So it's like you have a young player who's on an upswing, and you have an org that likes to back those kind of players. Like this is some scary stuff. Like I would love to see next year if Liereyy can start to dominate the game like Viper did for so many years, like at the end of Vubli and whatever, and at the beginning of DE, where he was still like the most dominant player and basically was always matching up who's going to take out the Viper, basically, or can someone take out the Viper. So Liereyy right now is not at that level, clearly, because he loses. Well, it's not that he loses, that he wins in very close fashion the series. He always goes to games, like to the end of the series. He uses as many games as there is, but he has that clutch factor. So, okay, so first part of the tournament basically is just formalities. I mean, in my opinion, it's not the best content. So I'm going to skip right ahead to the group stage because that's where it gets really interesting. Everyone who you expect to make it through is going to make it through the first stage. It's a little bit too big of a bracket in my opinion. But anyways, so my quarterfinals video, I showed that Group C significantly impacted the brackets for the quarterfinals. So let's break that down a little bit more. Group C was Liereyy's group because it was probably the closest group in terms of skill, because you had Doubt and Nikov, which are, in my opinion, really close in terms of skill level, and Liereyy maybe slightly above. Vinch was the clear 0-2 in that group for sure. But more importantly was like who's going to go 2-0, because the 0-2 pretty much we knew was going to be Vinch. But who's going to go 2-0, that would put you on the lower side of the bracket for the quarterfinals. And it would put you against the 2-1 player from Group B. So the one that makes it out of the 5th game of Group B, not against the 2-0 of Group B. So if you manage to win Group C, you get to go against a weaker player from Group B. And Group B was slightly less balanced, let's say, than Group C. Because in Group B, I think that looking at it, you could say, okay, Hera is probably going to be the 2-0. So if you want to dodge Hera, you got to win 2-0 Group C, right? So, and you could dodge Hera basically until the finals, because he's then into the bottom bracket. So Liereyy meets Doubt in the winner's match, and this loss pretty much changes the look of the entire tournament, because Liereyy then gets a matchup which could have been the finals of the tournament in the first round of the quarterfinals. And critically, I think that Liereyy against Doubt, it's a drafting mistake by Liereyy, leaving Doubt 2 Mesosivs, like I mentioned in my video, and that gives Doubt the opportunity to come back into the series and pushes it to the last game. And Doubt's experience and his years of playing the game, his clutch factor, he's not fazed by the pressure, not phased. He doesn't respect Liereyy, the young up-and-coming player, and he wins in a close fashion that series, knocking Liereyy down to the elimination match against Nikov, which he easily wins. So, Liereyy pretty much made him like a drafting mistake in that game against Doubt, and that puts him into hell for his run to the finals. It looks like for the rest of the series, though, Liereyy learned from that slight drafting mistake and not leaving the door too open for his opponents, and he always started to mitigate the amount of advantages that he gives to his opponent for the rest of the series, which would be super important because both series against Hera and Yo went to the maximum amount of games. So I think that he learned from his mistake against Doubt, and maybe a little bit of overconfidence, and then he totally came back strong with his drafting in the rest of the series. So he knocks out Nikov, and then he ends up in the quarterfinals. So like I said, in the quarterfinals, well, actually, global note for me, quarterfinals matches and the semifinals matches, for me, they felt more hype than the actual finals, because like I mentioned in my video, it feels like whoever's going to come out of that top bracket, that crazy stacked top bracket, whoever's going to come out of that logically is going to win the tournament, because MBL's playing super good, but he's not a top 3 player. MBL is probably maybe like 5th best in the world. So you have all the top 4 players in the world on one side, and you have MBL who's just below them on the other side. So MBL just basically plows through the bottom bracket, makes it to the finals. He has a clear run to the tournament. So props to him for not choking an amazing opportunity, an easier run to the finals. He had a good bracket, took advantage of it. Full credit to MBL. That's what you should be doing. That's what we expect from MBL. So Liereyy, though, on his side, it's like, if I just tell you Liereyy versus Hera, that could be the finals of the tournament. But it's the freaking quarterfinals. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. This is insane. So yeah, I think first of all, not only do we get Liereyy versus Hera, epic series, epic. Like I thoroughly enjoyed watching. That was probably my favorite series of the tournament. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a team battle too, so it's two teammates battling it out. I mean, it sucks for tempo, but yeah, that was just I love that series so much. And yeah, so we have that in the quarterfinals. Then he beats Hera. Who does he match up against? Mr. Yo. Like another Titan. If I told you Liereyy Yo, that is also another finals of the tournament. That's easily another finals of the tournament. And Yo, who wrecks the Viper, knocks out the Viper, like, you know, if we wind back the calendar like 8 months ago, for example, it's like, okay, well, whoever knocks out the Viper, basically, you're going to win the tournament, right? But now we're not in that mode anymore. We're in the mode where it's, you need to think about the other people beside you. You need to think about Liereyy and Hera and the up-and-comers, because once you knock out the Viper, that's just step one. Like, you still got to go through Liereyy. So another epic series, which just from a competitive angle, is probably the best series of the year because it's a best of 7. It goes all 7 games. I mean, you got crazy strategies, super just action-packed games. Loved it. Loved that series, but maybe not as much as the quarterfinals because I have a little spot in my heart, you know, for the young guns, Hera and Liereyy. But yeah, I think people online also the consensus that the semifinals were freaking epic, just totally epic, that series. So basically, quarterfinals against Hera. What I'm going to mention is that I think it's going to be a Liereyy and Hera or Liereyy versus someone else storyline now going forward. So that continues that. And then, you know, it sucks for Hera, but Hera pretty much loses to the guy who wins the tournament. So he knocks him out. I think Liereyy is not at the point where he can dominate Hera. Hera has a lot of fight into him. He even wins series off Liereyy. Comes very close down to the last game. I think Liereyy here slightly edges him out on drafting because Chinese versus Slavs, right? In the last game, the decider game, I think Liereyy has the advantage here with the Chinese. Considering also Hera had the Burmese, I don't know why he wouldn't want to mix in Burmese here. I think Burmese is a slightly better matchup against Chinese, considering that this tournament, the Slavs had a really garbage win rate. And I don't really see like a win condition for Hera with the Slavs, apart from going super late imp and trying to beat Liereyy super late imp, but we've seen that Liereyy can play super late imp now. He's good in the late game. So I don't know what the win condition is for Slavs against Chinese in this scenario. So I really don't see it. I think that maybe Burmese would have been a better choice to put more pressure and try to destabilize Liereyy. For me, it looked like Hera was the one being destabilized in that series. So props to Liereyy for edging it out. I think what is on Civ choice in that critical moment there, in that critical deciding game. Again, the clutchness factor, choosing the right Civ and playing it correctly. Okay, so then he takes out Hera. His teammate moves on to the semifinals. Like I said, competitive series of the year maybe. Like, can competitive Age of Empires get any better than this for a best of 7? I don't think so, honestly. For me, it felt way more epic than the finals because in my mind, I'd already like accepted the fact that whoever's going to come out of this bracket is going to win the tournament. Like, if you look at the quality of the games of the quarterfinals and look at how it was pushing, it was two players pushing it to the absolute limit. You look at the NBL side of the bracket, it was just not the same caliber. You could see it right away that it wasn't the same caliber. And that's why for me, it was clear that whoever's going to come out of this was going to win the tournament, which Liereyy did. And yeah, I don't know, the hype for me, I don't know how to explain it. I don't really have like any, like a more structured argument, like data to back this up. But for me, it just felt more intense. It felt like the pressure was way ramped up for this series against Yo with these awesome strategies, both trying to like mind game each other. Quick note here, semifinals against Mr. Yo. Mr. Yo in the quarterfinals wrecks the Viper, arguably by like reading him like a book. Liereyy does not have a stream. Liereyy is very hard to find footage of him outside of tournaments or show matches. Mr. Viper, for example, though, you can find tons of his content because he streams all the time. So I think that this gives an advantage to Liereyy because Mr. Yo has less information to work with and he can't use his amazing tactics and his amazing decision making and ability to read a situation and read a player. I think that Liereyy, just by the fact of him not being as open with his game as the Viper, for example, not being like a huge content producer, he has less information to work with. That works in Lierey's favor against Mr. Yo. It's a small thing, but this can make a difference. It's a best of 7 series. You're down to the last game, but this is the sort of thing that you like. Everything adds up into those kind of moments. So I think that Liereyy being a little bit more private with his content, with his strategies, with how he plays. Like if you want to study the Viper, you can go and watch thousands of hours of content of the Viper and really understand his mindset and how he plays and whatever. So I think that's what happens here. Yo versus Liereyy is that Liereyy has a slight advantage from, I feel like Yo was a little bit more careful against Liereyy in that situation and playing more his game, not reading into the opponent. So again, Liereyy comes to the end of a series and clutches it out. Clutch factor, right? So these are qualities you need if you want to beat out guys that you're in close competition with, right? When it really counts, are you able to clutch it out? So basically, I think we can conclude that Liereyy is pretty much deadly in the final games of series. Like he's really, like, I don't know what the stat is. I wish I could get the stat for this. I should probably put it together in terms of data. But when he comes to I don't know what his win rate is, but if a series goes to the last game, he probably has a crazy good win rate. But it's not the fact that it's every series that he does this, that it's in key moments that when he really needs to get through. Like in this case, the semifinals, like I'm sure he was thinking that if he just gets through the semifinals against Yo, he's going to the finals against a weaker opponent than Yo. Like I think MBL we can clearly say is weaker than Yo, even though he beat him earlier on in the tournament to get 2-0 out of this group. So yeah, then he goes to the finals against MBL. I'm not going to spend too much time on the finals because for me, I think it was a little bit less intense than the semis and the quarters. Those were the real highlight matches. Good fight from MBL, but like I said, his bracket didn't really push him to the limit. So then we got to see MBL versus an opponent that's going to push him, that's going to destabilize him, that's really going to challenge him, and he couldn't really resist. Wasn't the closest of series, but Liereyy just played strong. Like what else are you going to say about that? He plays strong and he picks up the win. So there you go. So that's Liereyy's run from basically group stage to the finals. What's the next step for Liereyy now? Well, I mentioned Tempo now, his new backing from Team. That is probably going to bring a lot of eyeballs onto the scene, I think, especially with a Tempo player winning a big tournament, winning a $50,000 tournament. We might see more orgs trying to get into this space. I would like to see a tournament organizer, because right now, basically, it's all the tournaments are run by individuals or individually sponsored tournaments, let's say. And yeah, it's awesome, but I feel like it's like if we could have, like, for example, a real TO run the logistics, the back end of a tournament, then we can allow the personalities in the space to come out and shine. Like you know, Mem was clearly working super hard in the back end of the tournament to keep things running, but commentate at the same time. So I feel like if you just took care of the back end for him, we could allow his personality, you know, and his amazing moments, and you know, his humor and whatever to shine, rather than have him bogged down in the details of running a tournament. So I think that the next step for Liereyy is, you know, building that Tempo brand with him and Hera, attracting more people to the space, and then trying to dominate the game like Viper did. Yeah, so he's not close, like I said before, he's not close to that level, because against Hera and Yo, it always comes down. It's like balls to the wall, full length series, you know, all in. So he's not that level yet, but that's pretty much logically the next step for him. I also think one last thing to mention is that stylistically, I think he matches up well against Hera, because he tends to, like, it looks like he's always destabilizing Hera, which it feels like it's tilting to play against Liereyy. But against Yo, I think he's going to have a harder time dominating Yo, because they have a different style matchup than Liereyy versus Hera. So that's pretty much the next step for Liereyy. So that recaps Liereyy's run, basically, from the group finals to the finals of this tournament. Congratulations to Liereyy. This is a huge win. It solidifies his candidacy as basically player of the year for 2020. And really excited to see what he's able to do in the next year.